Woo!
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of the 5, 8.5. I'm Lisa Graves, and I am here with Nadine Smith. We are here for your midweek break. And you know the routine. It's 5 stories, 8 minutes each, and a chance to refuel. We slow things down to sip, reflect, remember you are not alone. And we are not alone tonight, not because of a guest, but because we saw so many people stand up, come out, and vote. Nadine, how are you doing?
You know what? Usually we have a segment called the glass half full, and we'll do that tonight. But this whole segment, all of it is glass half full. Actually, it's the glass overflowing. That's where we are. How are you doing?
I am doing all right, and I actually have this bottle of champagne that, you all don't know this, but I broke my arm a couple weeks ago, so we'll see if I can actually launch this without causing harm.
Ooh.
I used to wait tables and be a really good opener.
Oh, okay. I'm impressed.
I still got it. You can take the girl out of the bar, but you can't take the bar out of the girl. So now, since you're not here with me, I have improvised with my my grandmother, my beloved grandmother's champagne glasses, to make the sound of a toast while we toast. We're just going to start with the toast. I may end up drinking both of these, but here we go.
You're drinking for 2 tonight. All right. Well, thank you, Grandma. I don't even know where to start. There's so many good things that we can talk about tonight. And,
yes.
Before anybody comes with okay, let's not put the cart before the horse. There's so much more work. We all know that. But let us, especially considering last week was pretty grim. Last week was a rough one. So we deserve to lavish in the results from last night's election. And I know we're going to go kind of state by state and, take everybody through, but there's so many bits of good news that that are emerging even now. Voters chose competence over spectacle, affordability, basic governance beat culture war noise almost everywhere. Democrats won big ticket races and notch smaller, structural wins that matter just as much. Court control in Pennsylvania, voting access in Maine, and even a broken Republican supermajority in Mississippi. So a lot to unpack, and no better way than to do it with a little something in our glass tonight. So where should we start, Lisa?
I'm going to start with sharing my screen, which I don't do very often, so bear with me because I just feel like we should start here. Hold on one second. Share my screen. This is and I'm going to play 5 seconds. Okay, so thank you for indulging me in that. That is copyright free. So, we can play it because the song
exactly really 5 seconds. Yes, it's like in those movies where they call the police and they have to hang up quickly before they trace the call.
Exactly. So, but I really wanted to play the song from Dirty Dancing because even though the lyrics are very romantic, it just really, I mean, we got to savor our victories. And so I'm going to read a few of the lyrics from Dirty Dancing from the time of my life.
Ooh, okay.
Now I've had the time of my life. I've never felt like this before. That's not true. I have a couple times felt like this before. But I'm going to say, yes, I swear it's the truth. And I owe it all to you, all the voters, all the volunteers. I've had the time of my life and I owe it all to you. And it says, I've been waiting for so long. But now I finally found someone to stand by me. We saw the writing on the wall. We felt this magical fantasy. And now with passion in our eyes, I know it's very romantic. There's no way we can disguise. We're going to take each other's hands because we seem to understand the urgency of the moment. So,
wow. I'll never be able to watch life. I'll never be able to watch Dirty Dancing again without seeing it as a political, polemic.
I brought my wand because it has been this magical time. I brought all the goodies. Nadine did not pre-approve of these options. But
you run wild.
yes, it's really
You run wild.
fantastic. It's fantastic. So we're gonna just I have another musical device here. You just heard. Anyway, we are going to jump right into California. Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. What do you want to say about California?
Well, voters approved Prop 50 by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, locking Democratic redistricting maps that counter the Republican gerrymandering elsewhere. Texas, all the places that Trump sought to rig the election. This is California didn't just stay blue; it invested in fair maps. It is an absolute repudiation of all of the blatant, voter rigging that Trump has made the cornerstone as his numbers continue to plummet, as his message of just cruelty continues to galvanize people all across the country. And so we are seeing, a repudiation of the lockdown, a repudiation of the immigration issues, an exposure that for all of his claims that this was an election about making America, lowering grocery prices, lowering gas prices, a complete repudiation. It has been about robbing the American, the coffers. And so, yes, it's been beautiful to see Prop 50 not just win, but win by such a resounding margin.
Yeah, I mean that was almost 2-to-1. So it was, I think the last data I had was 5.1 million votes to 2.9 million votes. There'll be more when they do the final sets of counts, right. But it was resounding, like 63% to 36%, and that was after a hard push by some of Trump's backers to attack this, and of course the Republicans filed suit today claiming that this was unlawful. While meanwhile, we've seen what's been happening in Texas, which this move in California was a response to what Trump has been calling for Missouri to do, and Kansas Republicans, North Carolina Republicans, anything they can do to basically continue to hold on an illegitimate majority in the House of Representatives. And I say that because the majority in that House stems from the 2022 midterms, even though the House is voted on every 2 years. But what happened in 2022 was that the Roberts Court decided in February of that year that it was too late to redraw maps that were in violation of the Voting Rights Act. So they allowed the Alabama maps to go forward, even though they diluted the black vote. And that paved the way for Georgia, Florida, and other states to also have maps that would be in violation of the Voting Rights Act go forward. And that's what gave the Republicans a majority in Biden's midterm election. And that was not a red wave, despite all the BS claims of all the right-wing pundits. But that narrow majority that Mike Johnson now is the leader of, that stems from some of these maps that were improperly drawn in 2022, some that, were still problematic in 2024. And now we're seeing this Roberts Court come in and possibly try to change the maps again. In that Louisiana case where Louisiana has 30% black voters, but the white majority Republican legislature decided to draw districts there for 5 white majority districts, 1 black majority district, which is now being challenged by the Republicans and before the Roberts Court. So California's move was a bold move, and it wasn't just a governor's move; it was the move of the voters of California. And like you said, it was both a repudiation of this effort to rig the vote, that Trump wants to have minority control in the majority power in the House. But I think, like you said, it was a repudiation of Trump, like basically across the board.
One of the other things that I think is so important for us to keep in mind is in some ways our entire democracy is built on not sturdy guardrails, but norms, and the idea that people would adhere to norms. And so we're not built for dealing with sociopaths. We're not built for dealing with people who will just lie, who will say Obama doesn't get to seat a Supreme Court justice because the election's right around the corner. And then when they're in precisely the same position, they cram, Supreme Court justices. So the Prop 50 in California was a signal that Democrats are actually willing to throw some political elbows and recognize what the stakes are, and not play by Queensberry rules when they're getting eye gouged, and crotch punched by the Republicans. So I think that's the other reason that it kind of is sort of a jolt across the country, because it's like, yeah, we're not playing around anymore.
Yeah, that's huge
with everything.
That's huge, because that sort of, playing checkers while the other side is basically boxing and rewriting the rules, as the game is underway, that the era of that is over. And I think we can see that in the people who are really emerging and playing a leadership role, not just, sort of a mealy mouthed, moderate sort of, why can't we just have norms or something in the Senate, when in fact the norms are being not just trashed by Republicans, but just destroyed in a very deliberate way, because the rules don't suit them, because power is the only objective. Now, I'm not saying that the ends justify the means in that way, but you just cannot, you have to fight fire with fire. And I'm really proud of Californians for standing up. And so to all the Californians in the crowd, in our audience live and later, do another toast.
Yes.
To Californians. Thank you.
Last week, I think it was last week, I can't remember which week it was, but somebody put in the comments, congratulations on your book, Lisa. Oh, and congratulations on your mead, Nadine. I just thought it was
your mead.
Yeah, it was like the equivalent. You wrote a book, I made some mead. Same.
I need to have some of your mead, though. I really do.
There you go.
I really do. Okay. So instead of playing the Hallelujah song, I am going to just do a little xylophone for a second as we go into our next celebratory topic on New York City.
New York. Oh, nice.
Yay.
Nice.
The applause. You got the applause there.
Production costs of just, we're writing blank checks now on production. Just
all right, I've got to get my next instrument ready. Anyway, okay.
All right. New York.
Yeah, New York. Wow. Okay, so that was also a resounding victory, huge victory. And there's, I think that Greg shared with us, or with Nadine and me, this Instagram from the Reductress, where it says, establishment Democrats just not sure if Mamdani went about decisive, crushing victory in the right way. And somehow that just sings to me with some of the commentators, like we had on CNN, I think it was Axelrod and someone else saying, basically shocked by Mamdani's win, and also this suggestion that he didn't do it right. I mean, the notion, like the unbelievable series of events in that race. First of all, you had his standout win, or heads up play in that primary. You had Cuomo, jump into the race or stay in the race in a way, and then get Trump's endorsement, and then embrace Trump's endorsement. And then, stand there at that debate when Mamdani said, what about the 12 dozen plus 13 women who accused you of sexual harassment, and sort of silence for a moment. And then you had, the former, outgoing mayor of New York, who was charged with serious ethical crimes, bribery, basically, and then was effectively released by Trump in order to basically try to get New York's cooperation with extreme policies of the Trump administration. And he was still in the race. He dropped out of the race. And then there was another Republican who popped in. And even when you combine Cuomo and the Republican, or should I say like the quasi-Republican and the Republican, they still didn't have enough votes to beat Mamdani. And even then, there's just been an outcry from Trump and his supporters about the will of the people in New York City, who duly elected Mamdani, who has, pledged a really ambitious and bold set of programs to deal with the rising rent and the rising cost of living there that the federal government under Trump certainly isn't going to do anything about, and in fact is making basically everything worse for everyone but the billionaires.
I think that Mamdani is being studied right now by every candidate, regardless of whether or not they withheld their endorsement or endorsed at the last minute, because, it's not just message discipline. Everyone remembers Al Gore, and the lockbox, right? Until you just wanted to throw, your glass at the television every time he said lockbox. Uh, it wasn't
Yeah.
a robotic recitation of carefully scripted talking points that you could tell had passed through the hands of 10 consultants. He just spoke to people about the things they cared about. Affordability of day-to-day life was far and away by nothing was even close in terms of what people cared about in exit polling. And again, it wasn't even it's the economy stupid. It was very specifically affordability, that we ought to be able to afford to live in the places where we work. And they could not pull him off message. And every time they would throw, anything at him, he didn't dodge it. Ask him a question, whether it was about, cannabis or what his favorite restaurant was or which team he was rooting for. You had Cuomo going, I'll root for them both, and being exactly the kind of politician that doesn't create confidence at all. Just feels like more pandering, more, tell people what they hear because you don't intend to follow through at all, and he spoke he told stories. The ridiculous thing about people going after him saying, "Oh, controversy, Mamdani's aunt didn't live in New York," at 9/11, only to discover that, a lot of people, especially Black and brown people, call the cousins of our parents our aunts and uncles,
Right.
right?
Right.
But
Right.
to behave as though that is a shocking scandal, it really is. It takes us back to the scandal of Obama's tan suit versus the convicted sex offender Trump, completely just so Mamdani's messaging, his focus, his clarity, his way of speaking, his unguardedness, no matter what they asked him, he was able to bring it back to the things that he wanted to deliver for New Yorkers. And in the end, despite hundreds of millions of dollars, funneled into New York to stop him, carried decisively.
Yeah, it really is astonishing, and he faced a lot of attacks too. As someone who's from the Muslim faith, there's a lot of people, a huge number of people on this planet are Muslims. There's been a lot of interfaith work over the years, including even with what's been happening in Israel and Gaza. People who are trying to get to peace, people who are trying to advance the opportunities for all Americans, all New Yorkers. And so I know that there was a heavy campaign against him, and this White House is going to be continuing those sorts of smears and efforts to try to, box him in some ways. But I think the voters of New York, really decided this is the guy they want to give a chance after so much lackluster activity by the current mayor. We've had that, I cannot even believe that Rudy Giuliani was the mayor, given, what's become of him and really who he was then in terms of the racial profiling and the way they use the New York police in the city, and the way he, parlayed the tragedy of 9/11 into fame for himself. It really is extraordinary. And so, I think there's some really exciting ideas that Mamdani's put on the table. And it's gonna, some of those ideas are hard to accomplish, but you certainly can't accomplish them in terms of addressing the inequity unless you're aiming for them. And this question of the sort of corporate opposition to him. One of my friends, Maurice Cunningham, wrote a piece just the other day about the SNAP benefits, and it was about how the SNAP benefits are really us taxpayers helping to subsidize these billionaires like the Walton family, who are not paying their workers enough to actually be able to afford to live with a minimum wage, minimum wages that barely cover the rent, let alone food, let alone all the other baseline expenses of living. And so I just posted that link in the chat because, the issue of the cost of living in New York is a big issue, and it has just been compounded by an array of destructive policies by this administration, and by the last time this administration had its hands on the wheels of power.
Yeah. No, I am very heartened. And I also think this is the reality. This is a moment of generational change. We're seeing it in how young voters turned out, breaking turnout records in New York. But the energy, the night before, I think, the end of early voting, Mamdani was out in the clubs, stopping by gay clubs, stopping by reggae clubs, stopping by hip hop clubs, and genuinely enjoying himself, being a high energy candidate. And you juxtapose that with, Mitch McConnell toppling over when he was asked a question. And people are tired of folks who have run their race, and have less skin in the game remaining, making decisions that will outlast them by decades.
Yeah.
And young people who overwhelmingly see a future where they can't afford the things their parents and grandparents were able to afford on a full-time salary. And we've just become, the proverbial frog in the pot, boiled by degrees, accepting less and less and less. At what point did we go, yeah, it's perfectly fine for companies to pay so little that they know that the onboarding process has to also include signing up for SNAP benefits?
Yeah.
Those days should be absolutely over.
Yeah, and let me just tell you who one of the main culprits in that is Charles friggin' Koch. Charles Koch, the billionaire who runs the second largest privately held corporation in America, has been bankrolling this group called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that I helped expose over a decade ago through ALEC Exposed. And they've been opposing even having a minimum wage, that there should be no minimum wage. And, Koch for decades has peddled the idea that minimum wages is basically theft from the richest few. And they and their cohorts have blocked every effort to try to raise the minimum wage, as well as, to have paid sick leave, to have paid family medical leave, to have any of the sort of basic benefits that most families need. And this, and the assailing a minimum wage is really extraordinary. I waited tables in college before I got to law school. And when I first started working on the minimum wage issue about a decade ago, or over a decade ago, I was astonished to learn that the minimum wage for tipped workers is the same it was in 1990, the last time I waited tables, 1991, $2.13 an hour or something like that. I remember the first time I got a check when I was waiting tables from my wage, it ended up being something like $60 net for the week or something. People cannot afford to live on that. And the tip wages, and that applies to people who wait tables, but it also applies to the people who are cleaning your hotel room and picking up your towels. It applies to anyone who's in that tipped field, banquet workers and the like. And, the fact that for some of those companies and some like the big hotel companies, oh, yes, I've got to pause to tell you this one moment. So as I began working on this issue, I was trying to figure out who's opposing it. Turns out the franchisors were the international franchise, Charles Koch, the international franchisors. And then I found this PowerPoint presentation, which was from the International Hotel and Lodging Association. And they had this big slide that they were going around the country saying, that raised the minimum wage from $7 and a few pennies to like $15 was an extreme wage measure. And I thought, oh, really? Because then what are the wages for Steve Wynn and the Hilton family and Sheldon Adelson and Mary Matt? Like how much, like if $15 an hour is an extreme wage, what adjective could possibly apply to how much these billionaires are making on paying these hotel workers, restaurant workers so little? So, I'm excited about having younger people running for office who are not captured, are not part of this machine, and are dealing with the lived experience of their fellow neighbors, their communities, and saying, hey, this is not okay. Like you said, Nadine, when did it become okay? And as some of the folks in the chat have pointed out, like, wow, the youth turnout in New York, amazing. Also in California, the youth turnout, when you actually are fighting for them, when you're actually trying to make things better, can be huge. It's not huge if you're just basically peddling a return to some, pass. And also it's another signal of not giving up on young voters just because there's been this concerted effort on the right to target some young men with regressive ideas, and men in general with this regressive agenda. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that in every single state across the board where Black women voted, they voted resoundingly for Democrats, for progress, for change. Like in the more than 90% mark of all Black women voters, more than 80% mark for Black men voters. And unfortunately, what we saw over and over was white men voting for whatever the Trump aligned position was, the majority of them. And so this continues to be a real drag on progress.
Yeah. Well, the exit polling clearly shows Mamdani drew a surge of younger voters in New York. I think election data coverage showed strong performance in younger, rent-heavy, bus-dependent neighborhoods. New Yorkers under 30, he got, I think it was over 75%.
Yeah, huge.
And he went, not only was his message clear, and he stuck to it no matter what, around affordability, but he went to where people were. He went to the places that young people hang out. He went to concerts. He spoke there. He rode the subways. He went to the community and stayed there. And we see that the issue of immigration, for example, there's like only 1 in 10 New Yorkers even ranked concerns about immigration as a concern at all. And and what we saw over and over again, certainly beyond New York, was that the culture war messages, they in Virginia, I think we're going there next, they did the same thing they did in the presidential, which was dump tons of money into these anti-trans ads. But they're going to the well too often. And now people, I think increasingly, in Florida, for example, anytime DeSantis starts railing about gay people or trans people, that another article about the Hope Foundation is about to drop. Another scandal is about to erupt, because that's his, hey, don't look over there, and so I think that what we also saw in this election was that their culture war tropes, their usual playbook, is getting thinner and thinner, and people are keeping the main thing.
Yes. So here's to the New Yorkers out there.
New York. There you go.
Thank you, New Yorkers.
Here. All right.
Now, I've got one of my favorite musical instruments for our next part on Virginia, New Jersey. I promise not to do that too much. That it actually goes like this. Thank you for that applause. That was awesome. All right. So Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, a tough race, but not so tough at the end of the day. I was actually getting these texts from her opponent because I'm, signed up for these various text chains on the right, so I know what's happening over there. And Winsome kept sending me these messages. Not just me. I don't want to pretend that I'm the only one who's getting these messages from Winsome, but they were repeatedly saying things like, "Hey, it's Winsome here. Before bed, can you do me 2 small favors? 1, please say a prayer for me and my team, and then 2, go read this this cashola sort of thing about kind of claiming that she was not able to raise enough money to win. But in fact, she had plenty of backing from the right wing in Virginia, and from out of state right wing cash. But she could not overcome just the real problem that the Republican Party is facing as being the party of Trump.
Yeah. There was just something creepy about her, though I will give her props for her concession speech.
Oh, I didn't watch it. Yes, yeah, tell me about it.
Well, she was just like, I lost. I've got free time. If you need any help, give me a call. There was
an actual
yeah. It was it was the only time I've agreed with her in this whole process.
that reminds me, one time when I was working in the Senate, It was right after Mr. Rogers died, and he was a hero to me as a kid.
Right.
And I love watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and just how much calm there was. And there was this voice coming over the intercom, basically this beautiful tribute to Mr. Rogers. And I was like, wow, like, who is that? It was jarring to realize that, in fact, it was Rick Santorum saying giving the only true speech I think I'd ever heard him give in my entire time in the Senate, where usually it's like every other sentence had some sort of disinformation or spin or like right-wing attack. Like, he set that aside for Mr. Rogers. And it was jarring because I had not ever really been nodding along to a Rick Santorum speech before. So I feel you on that, on Winsome. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm not telling anyone to go look this up, but remember when it was sort of a thing to add language to I think it was Urban Dictionary.
Yep.
And you could just kind of like
I remember that thing. I do remember that. Yes.
Santorum.
Yes.
Anyway, that's what it was really quite.
When we used to have our emergency drills outside by his office, and I swear, like, every once in a while we'd come around the corner and see him, and he had like, his pupils were like, vacant-y. He was he didn't know who I was, but it was very, he seems like a very driven guy. And, I did not get that warm vibe from him as a super devoted to his fellow human being, but, very, very, anti-choice, pro-life, very, used to sort of his credentials in that way. But yeah, that guy. So I like to not think of him mostly. So sorry to bring him up.
That's right. Oh, you know what? How can we go past New York without talking about Mamdani's victory speech?
Oh, yes. Go back. We're going to roll back.
Just for a moment. Yes. But I mean, it was so powerful. He doesn't miss a trick when it comes to delivering the message. Like, right across the front of the podium was "New York is not for sale." Yeah. And he has been so clever. Whenever he's on a show, a news program, he will say, well, let me speak to, directly to Donald Trump, because I know you're watching. And of course, moments later, there'll be a rant on Truth Social that shows you, yeah, Donald Trump was watching. And that speech, it was no different, where, he just laid out, the agenda, but also there was this moment that kind of gave me chills, because they said, throughout this election, their argument has been, if you vote for him, Trump, Cuomo's closing argument was, if you vote for him, Trump is going to send the National Guard. He's going to take over New York. And Mamdani has been really good about saying, we should expect that. We should know that that's coming, and we should prepare for it. And we should link arms with the governor, with the, state attorney, and community by community. And at that, in his speech, he said, we've got to send the message that if you come for any of us, you'll have to go through all of us.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most powerful moments. But when he said, Donald Trump, I know you're listening. I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up. And the crowd just erupts. It was powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was. I mean, that statement of unity is really powerful. And also just, it's shocking that we even have to think about a president disregarding the vote of the American people, of New Yorkers, or any state, any city. This notion that this is, it's madness. This idea that he can just decide who gets to be mayor. He's not the king. He doesn't get to appoint governors in particular states like they did in the colonies. He doesn't get to appoint his minions in any position in any city. That's just not America. That's not what our country's supposed to be about. That is the epitome of why the No King's March is so powerful.
And that Cuomo would use it as an argument for people to vote for him. Hey, if you vote for me, Trump won't send the National Guard to effectively overturn the election. Madness. Yeah. All right.
Just madness. Yeah. Well, right. I should we do another toast in New York? Hold on, we'll do one more toast in New
Yeah,
York.
one more toast in New York. There we go.
All right.
Ah.
All right. Virginia was, Virginia was also, there was a lieutenant governor was elected, Democrat, attorney general was elected over one of the right-hand guys who's been in sort of long-standing partner ally with Leonard Leo, who has spearheaded the Supreme Court packing machine. So his favorite AG in Virginia was voted out. There's a new Democratic AG in Virginia. The Virginia House has become Democratic again. A few years back, it had the first woman leader of the legislature in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Eileen Corn. Most people don't realize that she was actually targeted with assassination because she's Jewish and that was the leader of that state legislature. And so that was just a few years ago. And now the legislature's back in Democratic hands, which, provides a firewall against some of this lunacy, this right-wing culture war nonsense that has just been on tilt. And we also saw, sort of next door over in Maryland, the governor of Maryland, who was not up in this cycle, but talking about how Maryland is also going to be looking at how it can protect having a fair representation in Congress to try to counter the efforts by these white majority Republican legislatures to deny, Black representation in Congress. So we should do a toast to Virginia, to Virginian voters. Way to go, Virginians! I'm back.
Ooh, we're going to be so lit by the time we're done.
Yeah, because usually I'm drinking iced tea,
Yes.
All right. So New Jersey. I want to say the voters of New Jersey who came out in the aftermath of outrageous calls of bomb threats to numerous polling places in New Jersey. Some of those polling places were at elementary schools. The immorality of some surely right-winger trying to disrupt the vote to try to block a Democrat from winning the governorship back or winning the governorship again in New Jersey. The immorality of that action is so profound, so disgusting. But the police went in, they made sure the buildings were safe, and people came out in droves to make sure that they had the right to vote, that their vote was not wrenched away by that sort of stochastic action.
Yeah, I mean, and what was chilling in the lead up to the election was how much the Trump administration, all of the saber rattling that ICE would be deployed to polling places, all of the efforts to suppress the vote through intimidation, but the Mickey Sherrill captured almost 60%, some were 56% of the vote, and Democrats expanded their majorities in the state legislature. Exit polls show that voters in New Jersey rank the economy and affordability and taxes as their absolute top issue, while immigration and all of this rhetoric around, we're sending the guard because of crime, those less than 1 in 10 even included immigration or crime as concerns. And New Jersey was one of the other places where we saw Latino voters shifting decisively towards Democrats. Nikki Sherrill won nearly 70% of Latino voters in New Jersey, which reversed the gains that the GOP had made in electing Trump. So, once again, affordability wins the day. Yeah. Once again, we see Latino voter realignment and legislative gains that, she didn't just win, but by expanding these Democratic margins in the assembly, it means that there's real possibility of acting on policy. So,
it's amazing. And I saw that the governor of the state that you live in had comment on it, claiming that his buddy or, his fellow Republican would have won if only all the New Jersey Republicans had not flocked down to Florida. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Nadine, but that was one man's view.
Here's the thing I don't understand about both DeSantis and Abbott and all these guys who were like, anyone who leaves New York because Mamdani wins, I'll tax them. We don't want you here. Do you remember all that began?
Yeah.
I don't understand that strategy at all. I don't get it. It would seem that they would want people to move to red states who were fleeing New York. But I think all that we're seeing from DeSantis in that moment is, he's term limited out. He's kind of auditioning probably for his Fox News chair, and trying to figure out in the post Trump where he fits into the lineup. There's some people that want to put him as the heir apparent, but he really fumbled the bag when he ran the first time, and people kind of saw him for the kind of whiny, empty suit with just a handful of slogans that, his, mean girl comms folks gave him to
and the scandals with his wife and the charity. And I mean, that is not going away. Oh yeah. And someone wrote in the white boots, not that I'm being mean girl about it, but that was odd. It was weird. But yeah, so
but we did see in Florida, I mean, since we're talking about it, we saw a mini blue wave in Florida as well.
Oh yeah, tell us about it. Wait, let's toast the New Jerseyans.
Yes, we got to toast New Jersey. Yeah. Can't give New Jersey short shrift.
All right, here we go. All right, tell us about this mini blue wave down there in Florida. I say that as a northerner. It really is down for me, not in a pejorative sense. Yeah.
That's right. That's okay. But I mean, we just saw, there were seats that have been, strongholds for Republicans. What we saw in the exit polls were economic backlash that hit a lot of the loyalist, counties of Trump. The Pasco, Polk, Volusia, these sort of deep red strongholds where Trump once posted like 30-point margins. The exit poll shows that these residents are just feeling betrayed by these policies. And they really believed he'd protect working class families, but instead they're seeing all of these, their benefits go through the roof. And so, we saw that reflected in the polls in the central part of the state in Orlando. Democrats pretty much swept. You saw it in Miami-Dade as well. And so, you're just beginning to see that even in these places where, Trump's endorsement was a mortal lock, people aren't feeling that anymore. And with a governor's race coming up, that has got to play into how the candidates are going to start positioning themselves after watching candidate after candidate across the country really hammer home affordability, and that their culture war noise isn't doing what it once did.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I got to toast, especially to our resident Floridian and to the Floridians who are not giving up. I really have the equivalent of one glass between these two glasses. Right. So
chug.
So, to the Floridians. Now we're going to go up to the Georgia-Florida border. I think there's some band or music group that has that name. But anyway, Georgia. Yeah. Amazing progress in Georgia.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so Georgia is a state that we all saw in 2020 how in two special elections, 2 Democrats were elected there after the 2020 election was, the presidential election was over. And since then, there's been this effort to try by the Republicans to really consolidate power, try to take over the election board or limit the ability of the election board there, try to really hamper the power in some of the counties like Fulton County. We've seen efforts to investigate Fani Willis for her, personal relationships while she was, conducting the investigation of Trump's call that was not a perfect call, the call demanding that votes just be invented and created for him so that he could win Georgia and therefore stay in power. So Georgia is and Atlanta and those counties around Atlanta have, really been fighting against some headwinds with the white majority legislature in that state, and the governor and the attorney general, notwithstanding the fact that Brad Raffensperger did the right thing in 2020, but in some ways has not done the right thing in all the other ways. And so it's heartening to see that effort. And in Georgia, where, on the one hand, you had a situation in the 2024 election where, a billionaire named Elon Musk could basically buy himself a seat right next to the president in the White House by spending more than anyone has ever spent to individually on an individual presidential campaign. And yet in Georgia, the legislature passed a rule that you couldn't hand out water to voters standing in line in the heat. So, the resilience of Georgia voters, their determination, truly admirable. And so definitely wanted to make sure we highlighted the victories there as well.
Hear, hear.
Oh, another one. We're ready. I am actually going to possibly get tipsy. So
all right.
I'm going to pick this one.
All right.
Mississippi. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. So Mississippi, as you all know, a big victory there where Black voters turned some of the seats in that state legislature, able to get a majority in one of the houses of the legislature after really serious, long-standing voter suppression mechanisms in Mississippi, unleashed by John Roberts in that ruling in the Shelby County case in 2013 to lift pre-clearance and allow all sorts of machinations to go on there. So Mississippians, that victory is huge. I fear that the Roberts Court is going to use that as fuel to claim we don't need Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act because of that resounding progress in Mississippi, because they'll say anything to try to destroy the Voting Rights Act, one of John Roberts' ambitions over many decades. But today, and as long as we can going forward, celebrate that victory, celebrate that, because that's really serious door-to-door organizing to help people realize that they do have a say, they can have a say, despite the many efforts of the white majority legislature to make it harder.
Yeah. Well, Mississippi is where my father was born. It's where my grandparents were part of the first integrated farming co-op. It's where my grandfather was part of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, fighting sharecroppers fighting back after emancipation. And to hear Democrats saying Mississippi is back in play, where they have reduced the Republican majority from 36 to 34, which means the Republicans lost their 2/3 supermajority control, the same kind of control Republicans have here in Florida. So, I hear what you're saying about, these flips taking place in districts that were recently redrawn, but we know they're coming after voting rights no matter what. And so, Democrats are rightfully treating this as an important symbolic shift. And the state is no longer a foregone conclusion for Republican dominance. So I am very proud to see what is emerging in Mississippi, because it is definitely an indicator, because these Southern strategies, these racist dog whistle strategies, all of that, when you see the South sort of pushing back in the way Mississippi did, that should give people a lot of hope.
Yeah. And, the thing, so I've done a lot of looking at the maps and, how these gerrymanders have worked. And you can see in places like Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee, where they're not content to have majority rule through the way they draw the maps. This packing and cracking. So they're, basically packing Democratic voters into, more geographically limited districts, then splitting out suburbs so that they're joined in with some of these more rural areas. What that means is in Kentucky, where a Democrat has won statewide office, Governor Beshear can win statewide office when the map is the state, but still, because the way those maps are drawn, the Republicans have had a supermajority, which means they have the ability to overcome a governor's veto in many instances. It
Right.
also means they have even less incentive to compromise. So when you can move a legislature down from a supermajority to a majority, in theory, that at least opens the door to finding common ground and compromise. Right. They don't want that. They want to basically use their power to twist the maps enough so that they don't even have to consider the views of the minority politically, and Black Americans in particular. And you can see the impact of that in the policies of the state, the education policies and educational achievement, maternal health, maternal mortality, even before the Dobbs decision, but certainly, since then as well. And Mississippi was the case that went forward to the Supreme Court in that Dobbs decision. And so the policies of these supermajority white Republican legislatures is not benefiting the people of the state of Mississippi. The people of these states are suffering. Black, white, brown, Latino, they're suffering under these extreme right-wing policies.
Yeah, I just want to drive that point home about what happens when you break the supermajority. There are things that they now must negotiate. And not only are there things that they now must negotiate, but oftentimes there are Republicans who have followed the prevailing wind. They are in lockstep because there's no place to dissent. But once you end a supermajority, suddenly those Republicans begin to feel some power, what we might call moderate Republicans. And so it really does change the dynamic of what is possible, not just to proactively fight for, but the quiet ways that you kill bad bills. Yep. Because they have to, at some level, engage in a way they didn't have to before. So MISSI, SSI, PPI.
ANS. Mississippians. Yay.
All right.
Okay, now we're on Pennsylvania.
Everybody's drinking right along with us. I would hate to think that we're drinking alone.
Pennsylvania, Maine, and Colorado. I've got my favorite tambourine.
All right.
All right.
I'll have to find one for I'll find an applause one for them at the end.
Okay. Pennsylvania had 3 state Supreme Court seats up for retention. Retention races are ones, it's not often that someone is not retained, but the Republicans really tried hard. They tried so hard that outlandishly, the right-wing operatives that were advising that Pennsylvania campaign had Republicans put up no king signs, vote against retention. So they were trying to co-opt that no king's energy, which is so powerful, so growing, so attractive, and use that to try to take down those seats. Now, those seats are important seats for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Pennsylvania has basically partisan races for the state Supreme Court, and it also has some mandatory retirement. But the bottom line is that that retention vote was essential to helping to secure who is in the majority of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court when redistricting happens again in Pennsylvania in 2030 in that census. There's some more elections to come, but had those seats fallen, that would have opened up the game for the type of rigging and changing of the rules that we saw being subsidized by one of the richest men in the world through his support for, that's Jeffrey Yass, who is the guy who invested in TikTok and ByteDance, who's been, down to Mar-a-Lago and has been helping to fund this ballroom monstrosity of Trump, the Epstein ballroom. But Jeffrey Yass has invested huge money in Pennsylvania to try to undermine public schools, push for so-called school choice, and also try to capture the courts by backing the guy who tried to issue a ruling as an intermediate level judge in Pennsylvania, aiding Trump in trying to stop votes from being counted in that 2020 election. Next thing you know, that guy was backed by Yass for a seat in the Supreme Court. He won that seat, and Yass has been focused on that Pennsylvania Supreme Court and other offices, including district attorneys in Pennsylvania, as part of this smear against George Soros, this claim of supposed Soros prosecutors. And so in Philadelphia, the longtime Democratic prosecutor in that city was reelected resoundingly again, despite these smears. And there were other billionaires who played in Pennsylvania, including Dick Uihlein, the guy who got rich on selling boxes during the pandemic, a brewery heir who's been, involved in a lot of the groups that were involved in January 6th and more. So Pennsylvania has been a big target of the big right money machine, but the voters prevailed.
Yeah, I mean, preserving that 5-2 Democratic majority on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is massive, especially because we know that they're going after, voting rights, redistricting, election administration, all of those things. But a friend of mine who lives in Pennsylvania, she had shared that I was talking about how Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which was ground zero for the conservative takeover of schools there, Dems flipped both those boards back in 2023, but on election night, they ousted every single Republican from both school boards. So, it's not just the big, it's not just the big races, the Supreme Court and the Senate, these kinds of things. It is in these small, formerly thought to be impenetrable right-wing strongholds that we're beginning to see the fractures in their wall, in their coalition. So,
yay, Pennsylvanians.
Pennsylvania. Whew. All right.
Maine, where Leonard Leo bought his second home, his Robert Barron era mansion, as Brett Kavanaugh was about to be confirmed to the Supreme Court, despite the serious allegations against him, including of attempted sexual assault and of receiving the files that were stolen from me, along with other deep concerns about his background that he denied loudly, volubly. But the fact is that Leonard Leo has become a resident of Maine in many ways, and not just living there, but spending big money there. There were newspaper reports tying significant money that was traced to some of the Leo operations to the effort to try to tank, to change the rules for elections in Maine. And in Maine during this most recent race, in the aftermath of that, sort of some of those revelations of how, one guy with billionaire cash was trying to influence the outcome of the election. And also in the aftermath of that tragic shooting at that bowling alley in Maine a year or two ago, Maine also passed a red flag law that was hotly opposed by the gun industry and gun backers. And so, that was really two measures that move forward based on the strength of citizens voting and speaking out for their elections, for their communities, for their safety, for their future, and, turning back two sort of strands of big money from the guy with the billion dollar trust and from the multi-billion-dollar gun industry.
Yeah. You love to see it. You love to see it. I'm, a little known thing about me is that I was actually born in Bangor, Maine, and immediately crawled south. So I'm a Southerner, but I watch what goes on in Maine.
I had no idea that you were a native Mainer.
I know. Amazing. Is it Mainer? Is that what one? Is that what one is
called? I don't know. I probably got it wrong because I have had one whole glass of champagne, but I'm going to toast. This is like a double toast for me, which is yay, people of Maine, whatever you're called.
We're calling them Mainers tonight.
And hey, sorry, Leo.
Yeah,
not sorry.
Well, and yes, I'm just happy to hear about one extreme right winger who doesn't live in Florida now. So that's. But I also think, Maine is beginning to, in this, craft a way of speaking about these issues. The governor who's running for Senate now, and the oysterman who's gotten into hot water over some old Reddit posts that were quite ugly and a tattoo that is favored among Nazis. But he tells a compelling story about his evolution from an angry young soldier coming back from 2 tours, and unleashing that pain in the darker recesses of the internet until he began to find community and engage with people and move away from, stereotypes, and it is a journey. He does speak compellingly about how many young men in particular right now get pulled down that road. But there's just the messaging coming out of Maine continues to impress me for the same reason I think Mamdani connects with people. Very plain spoken, and of course I don't vote there, and I know that there's there are multiple Democrats running, but I've just enjoyed listening to how that sort of straightforward Maine talk, and I think the rest of Democrats could do to learn some of that. I think one of the things that plagues Democrats, I will just say it, and it might be this beverage talking a little bit, but I think one of the problems in our world right now is that, and this is the irony of me saying this as we do this very thing, is that it's like everybody's a commentator. Too many candidates sound like they're pundits instead of candidates.
Yeah.
And I really want to encourage candidates to stop listening so much to talking heads as our heads are talking tonight. But everyone doesn't need to be a commentator. People want to hear you talk about what you care about. They want to hear you speak like a real human being. And so I don't mean to go back to New York, but when you're telling stories about your own family, when you're talking about why these things are really personal to you, instead of waxing poetic about the state of things, I think it's part of why Gavin Newsom can come off seeming so, I don't know, insincere or too scripted, or too, like, all of his gestures. It's like the Matthew McConaughey. He's the Matthew McConaughey of politics.
Although I have to say, the Twitter account is actually, even though I loathe
the Twitter account is hilarious.
It is too good. It is too good. But let me just say, I haven't had a chance to look at that at the Senate race there. All I know is that Susan Collins, I mean, really, she has done such a disservice to the people of Maine. I'm looking forward to looking into who's running and who has a real chance next year, because Maine has gone without really good representation for far too long for someone who was willing to buy or pretend to buy Kavanaugh's lies that he wasn't going to overturn Roe, and basically play footsie with the far right in all sorts of ways. Like, she's been such a disappointing figure as a senator. So glad to see the end of that era, and very hopeful about what the future could be. And speaking of things that make me hopeful, in my home state, I'm not a Coloradoan or Coloradan. But I was so excited to see the people come out and vote for limits on people who earn more than $300,000 or more in order to support healthy meals for kids in schools.
Yes.
Like, these are the things that really should pass resoundingly. It was almost a 60-40 vote, but it wasn't a sure thing when it was initiated, because there's just been so much of a culture of greed that Koch and his operation has fostered, including targeting Colorado school districts, in a number of different cycles down in Douglas County and in Arvada and Jefferson County, other places. AFP has a big presence there. The right wing does have a big presence there in Colorado through some of the so-called think tanks that I call stink tanks that they've funded. And then, a lot of sort of oil shale money and other mining interests that have just a disproportionate amount of power in that state, as well as, the guy who is best buddies with Neil Gorsuch, one of the richest billionaires in that state. So it's a state that it's not necessarily as easy as it might look to pass really good positive measures. But last night, amazingly, the people of Colorado voted and they said, hell yeah, we want to fund nutrition for kids should be like an absolute slam dunk. And in a voting sense, 60-40, it basically was a slam dunk. But in this climate that we've seen with Trump, pushing through these unilateral cuts, trying to exert as much pain as possible, I think that, actually had a rebound effect. It helped fuel people saying, we're going to take care of our kids. Even if this president doesn't care at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's to Colorado.
To Colorado and Coloradoans.
It's Coloradoans. All right.
Okay. All right. So now we are at the 5. And Minnesota too. Yes. We missed a few. We may have to pick them up next week for the ones we missed. But this is one of my favorite drums. So I'm gonna a little drum as we come into the half, the glass half full, the glass full, the glass overflowing. All right. We did it. We're at the top of the hour. Nadine, what do you want to say to take us out on the glass half full, the glass overflowing?
Well, this whole episode has been the glass overflowing. And I want us again just to allow ourselves the joy of the possibility, right? We have been building towards this. We have been looking for signs that it was possible to put a stop to the agenda of cruelty that defines Donald Trump and his administration. And I think what we are seeing right now is Trump wasn't on the agenda, but his ideology was, his actions were, and what voters across the board in races big and small said, we don't like what we see. We want somebody who's really going to deliver on the promise of affordability. We are tired of the message that empathy is weakness. We're going to take care of our kids. They have not been able to shake the fact that they've broken the promise of releasing the Epstein files. We are seeing the awakening of young voters because candidates are finally speaking to them, not as though they need to wait their turn, but understanding that their turn has arrived and the future is looking bleak. And without people who will champion a future that they can see themselves thriving in, what a difference it makes. And we are seeing cracks and fissures in the coalition that the Republicans have put together with their massive disinformation dome. We are seeing the fruits of, all of this work, all of the protests, all of the organizing. And so while this is by no means ball game, I hope that everyone leaves tonight feeling like the glass is more than half full, and that all of those efforts are cumulative, and they are moving us towards a strategy that can block this cruelty, not just thinking about the midterms, though certainly, but what it means when we begin to link arms in dangerous times, one city, one community, one neighborhood at a time. So to all of the people, to the power of the people, to we the people, a toast. It is always wonderful to spend Wednesday with everyone. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, please do. And if you haven't had a chance to introduce friends to the show, please share the link. And as always, I'm Nadine Smith, thrilled to be co-hosting with Lisa Graves. Don't forget to tune in on Friday to the OG, the 5-8, and we will see you next Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.